But not a bad morning at all down here at the War Memorial in St. John's. If you can come down, there's still time to come down and join the ceremony. If not, stay right where you are and listen or watch online. We will, throughout the day, have a number of guests to talk to. This memorial, of course, built after the First World War, is in honor of all the people who sacrificed in not just the First World War, but the Second World War, the Korean conflict, the many peacekeeping missions that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians have been involved in, and of the latest, of course, the war in Afghanistan. But today, because we're still in the centennial of both Beaumont Hamel and generally the First World War, we'll stay, our focus in the broadcast this morning will stay with the First World War, though we're going to try and spend some time talking about the other battles and other issues rather than just Beaumont Hamel, because we spent so much time talking about that already, and with July 1st being the high point of those remembrances. Now, at this point, I want to bring Jenny Higgins into the conversation. She'll be with me throughout today's broadcast to help with all of this. She's a researcher and a writer. Her book, Newfoundland in the First World War, came out earlier this year. If you haven't seen it, it is a beautiful book full of amazing details, reproductions of letters and postcards and other war memorabilia inside the pages. Just a beautiful book. I was looking through it in the last couple of days, Jenny, and it is a marvelous piece of work.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to be here with you today, too.
Now, I can tell that took a lot of time, a lot of research. We're just going to pause for a second. Color guard is coming up the main stairs of the War Memorial now. There's a good crowd assembled here today.
It's a really good crowd.
Yeah.
Happy to see a lot of children here, a lot of young people.
Berkeley, get them people out of
I know 10 or 15 years ago we were worried that, we collectively were worried that people were forgetting. But I don't think so anymore.
I do not think so at all, having met many students who are interested in the war.
I have to ask you, with all the work you did for your book, immersing yourself in that time, how does it make it different? Does it make it different in some way to be here now at this sacred site?
It definitely does. I've been coming here since I was a child, but since researching the book the past couple of years, I find the ceremony today, the past few years, just so much more steeped in meaning for me. Looking at the figures on the statue years ago, I didn't know the significance behind each one, but now I know why there's a forester incorporated in the memorial. It's because of the Newfoundland Forestry Corps. I know what each figure represents, and seeing all of these people here today, it's moving. I've seen photographs of the first year the memorial was unveiled, and people were standing on the rooftops. They were filling the streets, and seeing that happening today. The memorial was unveiled in 1924, so this would be almost 100 years later. It's very touching.
All right, Jenny, we'll be talking.
Veterans and their families, Silver Cross representative, distinguished guests, members of the armed services, parade participants, visitors, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. My name is Peter Knoll, a member of Branch 23 of the Royal Canadian Legion in Carbonear. The Provincial Command of the Royal Canadian Legion has given me the honor and privilege of being your MC for today's ceremony of remembrance. On behalf of the Provincial Command, I sincerely welcome you and thank you for coming out today to Newfoundland and Labrador's National War Memorial for the commemoration ceremonies of this Remembrance Day and the 98th anniversary of the formal end of the Great War. As always, today's formalities are timed so that the silence happens at 11 a.m., for it was at that hour, the 11th, on the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918 when the Great War formally came to an end. The National Memorial came to be through the efforts of the Newfoundland Great War Veterans Association and the government of what was then the Dominion of Newfoundland under the leadership of Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Nangle, who had been chaplain to the Royal Newfoundland Regiment and the post-war director of war graves for the Dominion. We gather today in this sacred place, as we and our forebearers have for over 90 years, to remember the sacrifices and service of so many of our people. Today we remember the heroic services of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, the Newfoundland Royal Naval Reserve, the Newfoundland Forestry Corps, the Royal Flying Corps, the Mercantile Marine, the nurses and other members of the Voluntary Aid Detachment, and the thousands of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians that served with other forces during the First World War, and those that served in similar organizations during the Second World War, the Korean War, the United Nations and NATO operations, and most recently in Afghanistan. We're also here to commemorate the thousands of women who served on the home front as part of the Patriotic Association of the Women of Newfoundland, the members of the Newfoundland Patriotic Association, and those of other local organizations who supported and continue to support the efforts of our people in conflicts around the world. However, anytime we gather at this special place and at other memorials all over the province, today we also honor those who have so proudly served and continue to serve in the name of peace and freedom. Today, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians make up a significant number of those serving in our armed forces and who work to protect our freedom on a daily basis. Our veterans and their families are often in need of assistance of our communities as they face many serious and diverse challenges. These regularly last for a long time into the future. It is for this reason that we must stand shoulder to shoulder with them and offer the support they deserve and have proudly earned. Today's official ceremony of remembrance will soon commence following the arrival of the Lieutenant Governor and the Vice-Regal Party. Even though our parade showed up a little early, their honours will be here at exactly a time so that the silence can happen at 11 o'clock. For those of you that have attended previous ceremonies, you may notice some changes from year to year. These are driven by a number of factors, including the safety of our aging veterans, overcrowding at the Memorial Plateau, weather conditions, length of service, and other related protocol matters. Once we begin the ceremony, and after O Canada, we will have the act of remembrance. Ladies and gentlemen, this will begin with the playing of the last post by a bugler of the CLB Regimental Band. We'd ask then that you bow your heads and observe 2 minutes of silence. That will be followed by the lament, performed by Charlie O'Keefe of the City of St. John's Pipe and Drum Band, and then followed by Reveille by the bugler from the CLB. The act of remembrance will then be led by Comrade Frank Sullivan, President of the Royal Canadian Legion Provincial Command. Before the last post is played, you will hear the firing volley from members of the 37 Combat Engineer Regiment, who will proceed with the 21-gun salute to those we remember following the silence. So as I said, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, and I will return when we are ready to formally begin our ceremony. So are you going to sing now or what? Break into songs?
We're going to be doing interviews here. Okay. All right, Jenny. I want to bring Cole Deering into the conversation. Now, Cole, come on in here now. Cole's a young man that we know because you introduced us to him. Tell me a bit about how you came to meet Mr. Deering.
I met Cole at a heritage fair last May. I was adjudicating the heritage fair, and Cole did a fantastic presentation about his great-grandfather's service with the Newfoundland Forestry Corps. I was so impressed with this young man.
All right, Cole, tell us a bit about your great-grandfather, who he was and what he did.
Okay, well, his name was James Samuel Dwyer. He was from Shearstown. His nickname was Jim Sam. Anyway, he was 17 when he was 17 when he joined, but my nan keeps saying he was 15 a bit, but I got the discharge sheet there, so she won't believe that. Anyway, he was 17 when he joined, and then he went to, oh geez.
Where'd he go? But he ended up in the forestry
Yeah,
unit, did he, in
yeah.
Scotland?
So anyway, one day after school, he seen the poster for the call, and he went home. He was walking home, decided not to go home, threw his books in the river, and jumped on a train to go to St. John's, get on the boat to go to Scotland. And then, so his parents never knew where he was for like, it was a few months or something until they got a letter from him. Then he was over in Scotland cutting wood. While he was over there, he suffered from typhoid fever, and he was put in jail for 2 weeks because they thought he was faking it and almost died over there. And then they released him. They went back cutting wood. And
was he over there the whole war?
yep, pretty much. They started in 1917 until 1919, and then their job after was after they cut all the wood, they had to go back, take the wood back, like whatever was reusable. They would either use it for posts like fences and stuff, or they'd use it for firewood. So
It's funny. Jenny was saying she years ago didn't know why there was a forestry guy, a guy with an axe here on the War Memorial. And when you see that, it must mean something special to you to see what your representing what your grandfather did.
yeah, I do.
Now you brought a picture of him with you this morning. Can you show us the picture?
Better one than I got.
All right, and hold it up so that the camera can see it at home. And is that a picture from the war itself, or?
Yep. That's when they, that was some of the first ones, and that was a group picture, right? They had? That's a picture of him from his group picture. Yeah.
Now, whether he was 15 or 17, and let's
Yeah.
give him that your research is correct that he's 17. That's only a couple of years older than you are.
Yeah. Oh.
Can you imagine being in his shoes? Can you imagine doing what he did?
No, I can't. It's a lot to do. Like, I thought going over to France and stuff was a lot, but you know, go over and stay over there for a few years, right? That's hard to do.
And to bug off without telling mom and dad
Yeah,
where you're
yeah.
going to, especially.
Yeah, so he was
Now, speaking of France, let's talk about this special coat that you're wearing. How did you come to own this?
well, they gave this to me when I entered the trip. They everyone got one of these. This was the 100th anniversary of Beaumont Hamel this year, as most of you all right now. And I said on the back, I got the caribou and stuff,
Right.
and maple leaf. And that's it, really.
How does it make you feel to wear that?
Honored to go over there and walk the fields our great-grandfathers walked before us. It was just unbelievable.
All right.
That experience.
Well, Cole, thank you for coming by. Thank you for
Yep.
telling us about your granddad, or great-granddad, and thank you for showing us that picture.
You're welcome. Thank
All
you
right.
for having me.
All right, thank you. All right, Jenny, come on back into the conversation now. Cole brought up a topic there that I want to ask you a bit about for a second, and that is what this place was like on the eve of the war. Here we've got someone from out around the bay who hears the call and goes. And he was someone who, like we hear so many of these people, had no military experience. How prepared in any way were the people of Newfoundland, was the state of Newfoundland?
Newfoundland was not prepared at all for war. We didn't have a military department. There was no ground forces at all. There was a branch of the Newfoundland Royal Naval Reserve, but really we were utterly unprepared for war. People here had never even really seen a real soldier, so within a few days of them declaring war, the Dominion announced that it was going to raise its own land forces, a 500-man regiment of the Newfoundland Regiment, and it was going to double its forces for the Newfoundland Royal Naval Reserve, which was a massive undertaking for a small Dominion that had no military experience at all. And the initial reaction from the people was immense enthusiasm. Britain declared war, so Newfoundland was drawn into it based on that. But the people here, particularly in St. John's, they overwhelmingly supported Britain's entry into war, and they wanted to support it. So the initial recruiting drives attracted hundreds of people. It was absolutely no problem to recruit people. What was difficult was outfitting them with clothing and the equipment that they needed to go to war, like the guns. We didn't have any of that, so the hasty days of early mobilization, they were a little bit it was a ragtag bunch of people wearing civilian clothing. They didn't have hats, and they didn't really know what they were doing, but they pulled together. And by the end of the war, it was the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. What began as the Newfoundland Regiment was the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, and they were the pride of the Newfoundland people by the end of the war.
All right, we'll talk a bit more about that later. Jenny, I want to thank you for everything you're doing today. And I'm going to ask you to step to one side for a second, and I'll bring in our next two guests. That's Jenny Higgins. I'm Ted Blades. You are listening to CBC's special broadcast from the War Memorial, the National War Memorial in downtown St. John's. We are 4 minutes now away from the official start of the ceremony with the Lieutenant Governor arriving, and we'll begin that part of it now. Right now, I want to bring on historian Sean Cadigan. He's the author of Death on Two Fronts. Well, one of his PhD students is here as well. That's Mike Westcott. Gentlemen, I want to welcome you both to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Now, Sean, can I ask you first? We were just talking to Jenny about how prepared this place was for the war and how Newfoundland rose to the occasion, and we know how quickly people signed up. How did things change once the news of Beaumont Hamel came back across? How did the mood change in this place?
Well, I think that probably the biggest initial impact of Beaumont Hamel was that there was a surge to support the regiment, enlistments and so on. But it also brought home, in terms of the casualties, what this war was going to really mean for people in Newfoundland and Labrador. So the home front begins to change. By the end of 1916, I think it's becoming apparent to people that despite the surge in initial enlistments after the news of Beaumont Hamel, that it's going to be difficult to try to sustain enlistments and so on. It's going to be difficult to sustain the kinds of resources the war is going to need. So that begins to change the way in which people think about how the war effort should be managed. Eventually, that's going to mean by the end of 1917 that there will be a national government rather than the National Patriotic Association running the war, and there will be a whole new mindset about Newfoundland. So in some ways, you could argue that effectively before Beaumont Hamel, the mindset here is very much still that we're like a colony. But by 1917, people are going to be thinking about Newfoundland as being something like the Dominion it comes to think of itself.
Mike, I want to bring you into the context of the conversation now. Once men started to come home from the war, what kind of life faced them? What kind of supports did they have? What was the returned serviceman's life like?
Well, it was difficult at first. At the beginning of the war, most of the war was a charity effort. So there was no organized solution for the care of veterans until about 1916 and 1917. So you had veterans returning from 1915 onward, and it was mostly through sort of ad hoc volunteer organizations. So there was a big debate at the beginning of the war. There was this renegotiation of citizenship, and male citizens were expected to give service to the state, and a lot of people expected that when they returned they would be taken care of. But veterans returned to find that wasn't actually the case. So there was a giant debate, and some said that the government should be taking an active role in caring for these veterans and providing with the health care they needed. And luckily, the Women's Patriotic Association took a large role through what money they could scrounge to care for these people. And it wasn't until I guess 1916-17, that pensions and healthcare started to become organized and supported officially by the government.
I mean, that all goes back to what Jenny said earlier about the fact that the Newfoundland as a country wasn't prepared for the war in any way. It didn't have its own military. It didn't have any system set up to deal with the repercussions.
Yeah, and it seems that that's the case. And you see these sort of peculiar fundraisers. I mean, at the beginning of the war, there was a machine gun fund to raise money to buy weapons for the Newfoundland Regiment. And, the Women's Patriotic Association did an absolutely took an outstanding role in, raising money, knitting socks and blankets and mittens and things like that. And they even raised money for comfort items to send to the Newfoundland Regiment. One that sticks out in my mind is the Fish and Brews Fund, where they raised enough money for enough hardtack and salt fish to send over to the Newfoundland Regiment overseas.
This pressure that was felt here to step up, to do its part, for Newfoundland and Labrador to do its part, was that an internal pressure, or were there pleas and requests from Great Britain, from the other side, to do something? Where did that pressure come from?
Right. So there were two. I'd say that there were both types of pressures. I think that the external pressure would have been for us to support the imperial war effort. It wouldn't be clear, I think, exactly how we should be supporting that war effort. I think internally the pressure was for us to do something that was recognizably and distinctively Newfoundland in nature. And I think that the regiment itself comes more from that impulse. So, from an imperial perspective, what the Empire needed was people, right? People.
So rather than just sign them up for the British Army, we need our own distinct regiment.
Well, that's much more an internal pressure, I think, right? So we could have, many Newfoundlanders joined the Canadian Expeditionary Force, the Naval Reserve, British military forces, wherever they found themselves at the time. So even Newfoundlanders mobilized with Anzac forces.
You talked about how the pressure, a lot of the mobilization efforts naturally being in St. John's where most of the people are, but out around the bay and up in Labrador, how strong a presence did the war have in the early years? How strong was the response from there?
Well, I think a lot of times we hear that recruiting rates were lower in rural areas of Newfoundland, but I think that's often it's not quite the case. People don't realize that nearly 3,000 people in Newfoundland serve with the Canadian military because they happen to be living in Canada. And, it just happens that most of these people were from rural Newfoundland. So, I think that because they were, in rural communities, that they didn't get counted into that war effort. So, I think that's often overlooked.
All right. Gentlemen, we may get a chance to talk to you later. Right now, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to turn our attention back to the formal
Ladies and gentlemen,
ceremonies
His Honor,
here.
The Honourable Frank F. Fagan, Lieutenant Governor of Newfoundland and Labrador, and Her Honour Patricia Fagan, along with other members of the Vice-Regal Party, have arrived and will be welcomed by Comrade Frank Sullivan, CD, President of the Royal Canadian Legion, Newfoundland and Labrador Command, and proud 42-year veteran of the Royal Canadian Navy.
All right. Lieutenant Governor Frank Fagan and his wife are coming up the stairs now to the top of the platform of the War Memorial.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join the Church Lads Brigade Regimental Band under the direction of Captain Albertine Bethel for O Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have the Singing Legionnaires with the selection, the act of remembrance.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
We will now have the Singing Legionnaires with the selection, O God, our help in ages past. We'll now ask the Reverend Dr. Ian Wishart, chaplain to the Provincial Command, to offer the opening prayer.
God is our refuge and strength, a timely help in trouble. Those who look to the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar as on eagle's wings. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not feel faint. We're met today to remember with thanksgiving those who lived and died in the service of their country, and to ask for God's help and blessing as we may be worthy of their sacrifice. Let us bow in prayer. Eternal God, you are the shepherd of our souls, the giver of life everlasting. This day we commemorate and commend to you those who lived and died in the service of others. We remember that your purposes for us are good, and that you lead us by your Spirit in the paths of righteousness and peace. We remember the kindness of God and his favor to us in times of need. We remember all who followed the colors in war and in peace. We remember those who gave their lives that we may live. We think of young men and women who serve today, some far from home, some close at hand, who serve in danger. We remember those who have retired from service and who now must find their place in civilian world among friends and strangers in uncertain times. We remember those with wounded limbs whose bodies bear the scars of combat. We remember those with wounded minds who seek healing and comfort, medicines and counseling to face the problems of the day. We commend them to your care. We remember their families, those who love them, and all who bear with them and support them day by day. O God, many of your people have suffered from the scourge of war, families who have lost someone dear, innocent victims of violent destruction, men and women and children whose lives have been torn asunder, those for whom no healing has come. Comfort, we pray, the victims of war, and sustain with them all who cry for justice, for healing, for peace, for concord. We give thanks this day for all those who give service in our world, who seek the peace of nations, who give relief to those in need, who give comfort and healing to the sick and the injured, who protect the peace of every citizen, who stand watch by day and night. Let us pray for the peace of the world, for wise resolution of conflicts. We pray for Canada, for Newfoundland and Labrador. May our leaders be given wisdom and humility, our teachers given knowledge and discernment, our people be blessed with skill and industry, and may we together seek the good of the world and peace and justice for your people. May your blessing, O God, be with us all. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ and join our prayers with men and women of many faiths and traditions as we humbly bow before you this day. Amen.
Radio's live broadcast from the War Memorial in downtown St. John's. You can also watch this online.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the formal laying of wreaths, we have with us today Malcolm Anderson White, a grade 9 student at Beaconsfield Junior High and participant of the Duke of Edinburgh program. Malcolm has twice won awards for public speaking with the Newfoundland and Labrador chapter of the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association. Malcolm is the great-nephew of John White, who was originally from St. Mary's Bay and veteran of the Great War, where he served in the Newfoundland Forestry Unit. After the war, John White was one of 200 veterans given land in the Cormac area to settle and farm upon. Just after the Great War, John White wrote a poem in tribute. His poem will be read today by his great-nephew, Malcolm Anderson White.
The 11th hour. Wait, which mic is it? This one? The 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, so history say. The war of wars came to an end, and the endless stories then were penned. For just 4 years, how much was said of the raging battles and the fallen dead, of heroism of the fallen men, and the courage shown again and again. Where the trenches reeked of mud and filth, so detrimental to the health, where the bullets whizzed and the shells went by, and a living wonder who next would die. But onward they went, those khaki-clad boys, as the wounded fell and the dying died. The living screamed, they cursed, they prayed. The price was high, but it was paid. For every yard on each plain and hill, they stood, they fought, they fell. The righteousness might forever shine on the land of theirs, of yours, of mine. How much braver can any one man be than to lay down his life for you and me? Like Christ on the cross, he answered his call for peace to the world and goodwill to all. So just for a moment, let us stand still and gaze at that trench, that plain, that hill. There we can visualize the bravest of the brave, where the monument was erected on that unknown soldier's grave. They lie in the soil, it's theirs by right, won by their courage and their might. A place of freedom is ours, but yet it's theirs by right, lest we forget. Thank you.
It is teenager Malcolm White. On the platform here at the War Memorial in St. John's. We're about to begin the wreath laying.
Thank you, Malcolm,
part
for
of the
that
ceremony.
tribute. We will now proceed with the laying of wreaths, and during the laying of wreaths, the recessional and other pieces will be played by the CLB Regimental Band, and the singing Legionnaires will sing a number of selections. We'll now call upon Lieutenant Governor of Newfoundland and Labrador, His Honour, the Honourable Frank Fagan, CM ONL MBA, with wreath bearer Lieutenant Commander Tony Young, CD, aide-de-camp.
While the wreaths are being laid, Jenny, I just wanted to talk to you about one thing that always strikes me during the 2 minutes of silence. It seems like such a long time.
Yes, it's definitely a moment to think about the events of 100 years ago.
And it's a long time just to stand here, but I can't help but imagine what 2 minutes waiting to go over the top, or 2 minutes under fire, how long those 2 minutes must have been.
Ah, I've never thought of that before, but yeah, that's very moving. I think it would be endless.
Now Brooke Ingram, as the MC here on the War Memorial is saying, Brooke Ingram, who's the daughter of Sergeant Vaughn Ingram, who was killed in the war in Afghanistan, is here as the Silver Cross representative. And I remember the first time she did that when she was just a little girl holding her mother's hand, and now she's, a young teenager.
Oh.
The years have gone by without her father, and she's back here again. That was when I think we talked about the people being here more often, more people coming. The Silver Cross used to be the Silver Cross mother, an old woman whose son had died a long time ago. And then with the war in Afghanistan, suddenly there were young people. And it was people that we knew, people our age, who had died. And it brought not just the war in Afghanistan, I think, but all of the conflicts into the present for a lot of Canadians, a lot of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, I think.
In a startling way. I think the centenary as well is drawing out a lot of people. A lot of people learning things about their own families they hadn't known before, and their histories and their attachments to the First World War and subsequent ones.
Indeed. Kathy Bennett, our finance minister, is laying the wreath on behalf of the government of Newfoundland and Labrador. The Premier, Dwight Ball, is in Ottawa today. He's laying a wreath at the National Cenotaph in Ottawa, and taking part in a special broadcast, a special screening up there today of the documentary that the CBC made called The Trail of the Caribou. That's the ambassador from Turkey, Mr. Emrem Ozen, the consul for the Turkish embassy here, laying a wreath. Someone who was once, a country that was once the combatant, now here to help us remember.
Yes, in Gallipoli. Yeah.
Norwegian ambassador to Canada, wreath bearer, His Excellency Arthur Wittich, Canadian ambassador to Norway.
Hey, Frank.
On behalf of the Nunavut government, Tama Faust, Canadian Constituency Officer for the Constituency of Canada, Nunavut Assembly, wreath bearer Frederick Faust, son of Tama. On behalf of the City of St. John's, His Worship Mayor Dennis O'Keefe, accompanied by Christine Raymond, who is the Mayor of Tromsø in the country of Norway, wreath bearer Deputy Chief Don Byrne of the Fire Department Honor Guard. On behalf of the Women's Patriotic Society 1914-1918, Her Honor Patricia Fagan, Wreath Bearer Lieutenant Commander Tony Young, CD Aide-de-Camp.
All right, I want to bring into the conversation now Frank Gogos. He has written a couple of books on the Great War, specifically on the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. His latest is the Royal Newfoundland Regiment in the Great War, a guide to the battlefields and memorials of France, Belgium, and Gallipoli. Frank, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the focus this year has been quite rightly on Beaumont Hamel, but I wanted to talk with you for a moment today while the wreaths are being laid about the battle that brought the royal designation to the Newfoundland Regiment. When they fought at Beaumont Hamel, they were just the Newfoundland Regiment.
Yeah.
Talk to us about Cambrai.
Well, Cambrai is not specifically the reason why we have the royal designation. It had a lot to do with the actions that the regiment was in 1917 and a campaign to have the name, the royal re-established into the regiment's name from its previous incarnations. It's very unique that the royal designation was given during the war. The only unit to have been given that distinction, and only the third time in history has it ever been done, and the last time. And it's more or less a gallantry award to all the Newfoundland Regiment soldiers who fought for the British Empire during the First World War.
In a war where so many people died, where there were so many examples of bravery, so much sense of slaughter, what do you think it was about the Newfoundland contribution that singled them out for that?
It's you know, as a Newfoundlander, I'm very proud of the record and the service of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, of course. But you know, coming from a small country as we did during those days, they had something to prove. And so when they were called into battle to do specific tasks, they were usually given some of the toughest jobs to take care of, and because of that they suffered great losses, and as you know, many of those losses are coming from small-knit communities, so it hurts us especially hard every time that the regiment would advance during the war.
In the few short months since the centennial of Beaumont Hamel, we passed through the centennial of Goudencourt, and coming up here in the spring,
Yes.
We have Montreal-le-Preux,
Yeah.
a battle that sounds like it should be a movie script from the Newfoundland and Labrador role in it.
Yeah.
I'm surprised there's not a movie now. Tell me a bit about Monchy and what happened there.
Well, Monchy is a very interesting battle for the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. They suffered a tremendous amount of casualties, as you may well aware, but during that battle, the regiment again was just about wiped out. And some poor planning had left the very important position on the battlefield wide open for the Germans to retake. And instead of you know, folding and retreating, the handful of headquarters men that were stationed in the village at the time decided that instead of falling back, that they would go and meet the enemy. Now, when they left, there was only 20 of them strong, and they knew they were about to meet a force of 300 to 500 soldiers coming on the village during that battle, and only 9 actually made it to a safety of a trench in which they were able to lay down some covering fire and prevent the Germans from actually coming in. It was very unusual in that the Germans had no idea what was happening, so they wouldn't push that part of the line. Had they known, of course, they would have been able to retake a very important position on the battlefield. One of the primary targets of the First Battle of Arras, along with Vimy Ridge.
So tell me about the Monchy 10.
Well, these are the guys that actually made it to the what was called a hedge, about 100 yards out from the outskirts of the village, and there was 9 Royal Newfoundland Regiment soldiers and 1 from the Essex, who laid down covering fire, rapid fire when they first got there, and then began picking off scouts and snipers. So there's no information could travel back to the main German lines to let them know that there was only a small band there.
And I understand they moved around a bit to try and present the idea that there were more of them. Is that just a story that's come down through the years?
Not necessarily like that, because it was a small portion of trench that they occupied. So, you know, what they did do is they did something called rapid fire in the beginning. So when you have 9 soldiers laying down rapid fire, the 10th soldier didn't come in until about an hour and a half later. It has the tendency tendency to seem like it's a machine gun fire. So the Germans were probably thinking they were looking at a strong machine gun post at that time.
I want to ask you one more question, Frank, the same question I asked Jenny earlier in the show. Immersing yourself in all the history of that time and doing all the research, how does that change things for you when you come here to the War Memorial, when you come on either the 1st of July or November 11th?
How's it changed? I guess it's the people that you meet along the way and the families that are connected to these events, and how much today that it still means to them, even though we may be removed 3 and 4 generations. Especially here in Newfoundland, we seem to be still very well connected, very much connected to the First World War and what happened there. And when I come here now, I know so many people and I know so many stories, so it has a profound effect. As well, I work closely with the Royal Newfoundland Regiment of today, and I know many of my friends that serve in these forces, have been to Afghanistan, and this is a way for myself to pay respect.
All right. Well, Frank, thank you for coming by and sharing a couple of your stories with us today. That is Frank Gogos. He is the author of The Great War, A Guide to the Battlefields and Memorials of France, Belgium, and Gallipoli. Jenny Higgins has been helping me throughout the show this morning. We're gonna let the Legionnaires sing here for another second, and then I've got a couple of questions for you.
And the Singing Legionnaires.
All right, Jenny. Sean Cadigan talked earlier, and Mike Westcott as well, about the role that the WPA had in the here. But I wanted to talk more in a larger way about the role that women played in Newfoundland's effort in the war. It was so much more than that, I guess, not to take away from that massive effort.
Representing veterans associations, Canadian Peacekeepers, Korean War Veterans, Canadian Merchant Navy Veterans Association, Newfoundland Overseas Forestry Unit,
nurses.
150 Wing
Professional nurses could go and work in hospitals, but women who wanted to go overseas but weren't nurses could do a few weeks of training and join a group called the Voluntary Aid Detachment, the VAD. So these women did tremendous work overseas. They were in military hospitals. They could serve in hospital ships that would be threatened by U-boats. They could drive ambulances. Some would have to go to the front lines to pick up soldiers and bring them back. And every day these women, they worked with soldiers who were wounded coming in from the front lines. So they really saw the damage that war could do to a human body, a human mind, just shattered men. And many of these women also had their own relatives on the front lines. So I can't imagine what it would be like knowing someone you love is on the front lines, and every day you're seeing the wounded coming in.
St. John's
So
Regional Fire Department,
nurses were overseas. At
Office of the
home,
High
the
Sheriff,
WPA was a
Canadian Coast Guard,
tremendous
Her Majesty's
fundraising
Penitentiary,
group.
Corps of
15,000
Commissioners,
women
Cadets,
across the
Newfoundland
island,
and Labrador.
of all walks of life. We have the upper classes, the lower classes, all religious denominations. It was a unifying force. And these women, one of the most famous things that they've done that we remember today is that they knitted the iconic Newfoundland sock, which everyone knows. We had thousands of women knitting tens of thousands of socks, which they'd send overseas as comfort for troops. They would raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, which today would be millions. This built hospitals at home. It built hospital wards overseas, put beds in those hospitals. The activities of the women it received a lot of positive attention from the public, the press, politicians. And what happened after the war is a lot of these women who were nurses and volunteers with the WPA, they joined the suffrage movement, and a lot of the positive attention that was shone on their activities during the war carried over after the war. And as they strove to get the vote, public attitude was behind them, and these women who worked so hard during the war, they also, after the war, got women the right to vote in 1925. It's a great story.
I can't inhabit the head of someone who grew up in that era, but it's hard to tell someone that they're a lesser creature after seeing what they did in the war, as you say, on both sides of the Atlantic.
Well, that was one of the arguments. We have proven publicly that we contribute so much to society, we cannot be denied the vote. And editorials in newspapers said the same, public sentiment said the same, and the bill was passed it was made law April 1925 that women got the right to vote. They're heroes,
They got that respect, but do you think because it seems to me it took a lot longer for them to get to the respect in other ways for having died in service. When I was over in England last year, we're going to play this documentary that I made in Wandsworth in a few minutes. There's Bertha Bartlett lying there with the soldiers that she looked after. She served 4 years in the war, and she dies of the flu, the Spanish flu, 2 weeks before they call it off. And she is one of so many women who are buried in Commonwealth graves who, as you said earlier, women who put themselves in harm's way in the field hospitals, driving ambulances. And I don't know that we gave them the vote then, but I don't know that we called them heroes for a while.
Well, this is a beautiful memorial, but who's missing from the memorial?
There are no women
There's
here.
no nurse, so there was a lot of respect given to women, but I mean, how beautiful would it be to see a nurse standing here among the other figures? Now, there was a nurse who was working here on the home front, Ethel Dickinson. She died from Spanish influenza in 1918, and there is a monument to her. It's by what was then the Newfoundland Hotel, and it was meant to honor her contributions to the war and all women to the war. But yes, I mean, I think
It would be nice to have something here, wouldn't
it would be nice to have something here. Yes, I think so.
We should think about that. We start something. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left in our broadcast here on CBC Radio 1 in Newfoundland and Labrador, and online at cbc.ca/NL, also on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. About 5 minutes left here at the War Memorial, and then we're going to go to this documentary from England that I made in the last year. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a second. But before we leave downtown St. John's, Jenny, I want to bring Clooney McPherson into the conversation. Of all the thing about the First World War was it was an unfortunate time of technological innovation. Wars always bring out the technological innovation. The machine gun plays a giant role for the first time. It had a role in the American Civil War, but its devastating effect, and the artillery. But of all those horrible things, poison gas must have been the most insidious weapon created at that time.
Yeah, well, first of all, Clooney McPherson, I love his story. And the First World War definitely did initiate an arms race. So we see, underwater bombs targeting submarines. Poison gas had been around for a long time, but it had never been used on a large scale before the First World War. So in April 1915, the Germans launched a large-scale gas attack against French troops. I think something like 5,000 people died that day, so Allied commanders realized we need a defense against this, and we need it fast. So they assembled an international team of scientists and doctors, and one of the people they invited was Clooney McPherson from St. John's, Newfoundland, a doctor here. So they were working on an early prototype of a gas mask, which was essentially a rectangular cotton pad that they would tie around their face and it would cover their mouth and their nose. And the scientists would test this mask themselves by going into what's called the stink chamber, releasing the gas, and hoping the mask would work. This early prototype often didn't, so the scientists would come running from the room sputtering and coughing. And Clooney realized, okay, this design is not working. And he, on the side, came up with his own design, which was essentially a bag, sort of imagine a pillowcase that you could put over your head with an eyepiece. And this would be soaked in a solution that would render gas harmless as it came through the mask. As the person inhaled, the gas would come through the solution on the mask. So Clooney McPherson recruited the help of a nurse who sewed up a first prototype of this cloth mask to go over the wearer's head, and he showed it to his colleagues. He said, I'd like to try this out in the stink chamber. And they were very skeptical at first. You can read his notebooks. He wrote they didn't believe it. They thought a man would smother wearing this. So he convinced one of his colleagues to put on the mask, go in the stink chamber, and then they turned on the gas, 5 minutes later, this person wearing the mask, he knocks on the window, he's upset, he says, "Why don't you turn on the gas?" And Clooney McPherson says, "You've been standing in a cloud of gas that's 10 times more concentrated than what we believe could come over to our trenches." So his gas mask was an instant success. Allied commanders ordered millions to be made. Clooney McPherson was put in charge of the manufacture. And women played a really important role in the manufacture of the gas masks too, because a lot of the men were on the front, so they were recruited to sew together the masks. And there are beautiful photos of just warehouses with rows and rows of tables, rows and rows of women sitting at them with piles of gas masks just stacked up next to them. And I mean, the gas mask, it's a life-saving invention, so it's one of the very positive technological innovations to come out of the war. Clooney McPherson invented that prototype. Allied commanders ordered, he wrote 22 millions. So think about how many lives that saved. It's
an amazing piece of history, an amazing contribution that Newfoundland and Labrador made.
Yeah, something to be proud of.
Yes. All right, Jenny Higgins, I want to thank you for helping us with the broadcast this morning and telling us all these stories, bringing this part of the history of the war to life.
Well, thank you for having me. It was an honor.
All right, that's Jenny Higgins. I'm Ted Blades. You have been watching and listening to a special live broadcast from the National War Memorial in downtown St. John's. We are going to leave this site now and take you to a documentary that I created when I went to England this time last year on the 11th of November in 2015. I was in Wandsworth Cemetery in London, where some school children look after the graves of some Newfoundland soldiers and a Newfoundland nurse. And we will bring that story to you now. After that, Ramona Deering is here with Crosstalk. She's going to ask you who you're remembering on today, Remembrance Day.
Hi, I'm Ted Blades, host of CBC Radio's On the Go. I want to tell you a story now about 18 Newfoundlanders who died during the Great War and the British school children who've all but adopted them. This story is set in the London borough of Wandsworth, where you'll find the Earlsfield Cemetery, home to hundreds of military graves belonging to people who died in one of the many hospitals set up in London on the eve of the First World War. 17 soldiers and 1 nurse lie together in the Newfoundland Regiment plot, forever far from home, but not forgotten, not by the children across the road at Beatrix Potter Elementary. This story is called We Were Here Once, We Are Still Here Now.
Silas Edgecombe, born 18th of February 1895, Okapit Cove, Beatty Birds District, Newfoundland. Height 5 feet 6 inches, weight 145 pounds, job fisherman. Date joined up, 24th of February, 1915.
It's the day before Remembrance Day, or Armistice Day as they call it here in England. Rose Cush and the other Year 6 students in Mr. Knapp's class are hard at it, trying to put together a short presentation about their soldiers.
Can we, guys, when you get up, first 3 come and form the first bit of the aisle, next 3, next bit of the aisle.
Right now, they're trying to synchronize their live parts with the archival photos and film footage they found on the internet.
Okay, finish it off. I think it makes it nice and tight as well. Okay, quick. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Okay, wait for the music. Sorry, we'll wait for the music tomorrow. Take your time. No rush.
Tomorrow's a big day because these kids, they're just 10 years old, will be performing their play for 1,500 students at a nearby high school. And like James Lossy, they want to get it right.
Edward Peckford, regiment number 1656. 1st of July 1916. Wounded at Beaumont Hamel while serving with B Company during the fighting of the first day of the Battle of the Somme. He sustained injuries to his left thigh inflicted by gunfire. 6th of July 1916. Evacuated back to England from France. Private Peckford was admitted into the 3rd London General Hospital in the borough of Wandsworth, 19th of August 1916. He was considered dangerously ill from septicemia. 1st of September 1916. Private Peckford was buried in a Newfoundland plot in the Earlsfield Cemetery. He was accorded full military honours, the firing party and bearers from the 12th Suffolk Regiment. Age of death, 20.
To think where we were at lunchtime and to think where we are now, it's fantastic. I reckon.
Do one more run through and then.
Okay. All right, well done. Good guys.
The students leave the classroom and tumble down the stairs into a corridor dedicated to the soldiers. There are reproductions of their enlistment papers posted on the walls, along with maps of the battlefields in France and black and white photographs from the Great War. And there's an old recruiting poster, too, for God, for King and Empire, for Newfoundland. On a table in the hall sit a series of scrapbooks, one for each of them. On the wall above the table, some color photos from a school trip to France a couple of years ago, to Beaumont Hamel, where the sign says 6 of our soldiers were wounded. And to think this connection between the living and the dead began by accident. On a November's day a dozen years ago, a group of students from Beatrix Potter walked across Magdalen Road to gather some conkers, the seeds of the horse chestnut tree, of which there are many in Wandsworth Cemetery. It was just after Armistice Day then, and most of the war graves, British graves, had poppies on them, placed there in the past few days. But not, one student noticed, not the graves in one particular plot. Why haven't they got any poppies, she asked. And Beatrix Potter's head teacher, Steph Neal, replied, why don't we find out?
So the kids were saying, well, it seems a bit unfair and it's rather sad that they don't have poppies. So is there something we could do? So we decided, okay, we can make a little tribute and put poppies and maybe a little statement on the actual graves. And from there, the children obviously were saying, well, okay, what is it about them? Who are they? Where are these soldiers from? You know, we know their names because it's on the grave, but who are they? What did they do? What happened to them? And so they became very much the centre of our attention, particularly as their First World War, and we know that there was a hospital nearby where these soldiers were, and so we decided that besides putting a poppy on them, we wanted to know something about them. And that's basically how it all started.
I remember doing it and I think it just felt right because all those soldiers, they just fought and they died for our country.
It was really nice doing that. It felt good.
Honouring loads of people that put their lives for us.
While Rose and Poppy and Zach take a break from their rehearsals, the Year 2 set off for their first official visit to the cemetery. The children bring with them 18 popsicle sticks, a poppy and a small Newfoundland flag glued to each one of them, along with a card bearing a name and the inscriptions "In loving memory of" and "A brave soldier from Newfoundland."
A brave mare from Newfoundland.
The way to do this is a bit like they were doing on Sunday. You're going to take, those of you that have got a name, you can walk along and look for the second name, and then when you find it, all you've got to do very nicely is just put the little wooden stick just in the ground, just below the lovely cross that's marked. All right?
Chesty Mercer.
Oh, Frederick Bastow. Here we are. Frederick's round here. Come right round. There you are. Look, can you see his name? Yeah. There you are. Would you like to put it on?
We've got somebody called Alfred.
Now, who have you got, young lady?
We've got...
Is that Bertha?
No,
okay, that's the nurse.
Bertha Bartlett, is the only woman buried in the Newfoundland Regiment plot. She was a nurse who spent the war years tending to the wounded, and she died of the Spanish flu just 8 days before the end of the war, 2 weeks shy of her 24th birthday. Poppies planted, the Year 2s returned to the classroom while their teacher, Faiza Arjoui, turns today's trip into a lesson.
Who can tell me one thing they learnt from going to the cemetery with Mr. Neal and the other Year 2 class?
We learned that some of the parents of the soldiers didn't get to see their soldiers' graves.
Yes, so the families would be really happy that we remember them because they're just here, so close to our school. Did you see the ages of the soldiers? Did anybody notice how old these soldiers were? Alice?
One of the soldiers died when they were 22.
Exactly, a lot of them were very young, yes, but...
Well, I said to Hassan, let's go and put it on the one that was 21, and then he went off and put it on another one. But okay. I said to him, put it on the one that's 21 because he's younger.
Okay, so your task today, now that we've come back from the cemetery, I would like you to complete this sheet. about your visit. So you can write a little bit about why we went to the cemetery, why it's important for us to do that, and what you did when we went there, okay?
History is important, particularly local history. And when you're looking at things around you, there's history everywhere. Because you knew somebody, although these soldiers, these Newfoundlanders, were wounded and died and are buried there, having their records and seeing their pictures changes the way the children view them because they are brought to life. And children rise to that. And it's really important they understand the past, and they can do that through somebody who was there, even though they're dead now. So to me, and also to the teachers at Beatrix Potter, finding those moments that actually bring to life something like history or geography, maths, English, whatever, is really vital. And you can see in the way the children react to it how important it is to them.
It's important to know their name, otherwise they'll be forgotten, and they're Newfoundland soldiers. They helped Britain win the war.
They weren't just some random people who went into the war. They gave their lives to give us freedom.
It's the next day now, Armistice Day itself. 1,500 girls, almost the entire population of Burntwood, fill the school's massive auditorium. The lights go dim, and black and white images from the First World War begin to flicker across the screen above the stage. Beneath the pictures, the students from Beatrix Potter march on stage pretending to be the soldiers they've come here to talk about.
Edward Peckford, son of Ellie and Elizabeth Peckford of Change Islands, Newfoundland. Job, labourer. Height, 5 feet 9 inches. Siblings, 4 sisters. Religion, Church of England. Age of enlistment, 18.
John Charles Edwards. Mother and father, one brother named Joseph Edwards, no wife. Occupation, painter. Rank, colonel.
Burntwood School last year, along with the rest of the country, celebrated the 100 years of the beginning of World War I. And this year, Burntwood said to us, because some of the children that have gone from this school to Burntwood obviously did the presentations in the graveyard to the Newfoundland soldiers. And Helen Dorfman, the head of Burntwood, said, would we come and do something about World War I to their high school? And we said we'd love to. So we said to our children, one Mr. Knapp's class, one of our Year 6 children, here's an opportunity to showcase those soldiers, to bring them to life, explain who they were, what they looked like, and what happened to them, and what happened to the rest of the Newfoundlanders. And that's what we did, and the children rose to that challenge.
1st of July 1916. There's a few hours left till we go over the top. No man's land. The rain is unrelenting, and so are the guns. This may be the last you hear of me if somebody finds this.
Now, the screen shows photos from 100 years ago of soldiers huddled in the trenches with pen and paper, while our young actors read excerpts from letters home they found online.
My name is John Charles Edwards. I am aged 24 and I'm a Canadian, a Newfoundlander. I took part of this war not realising what lied ahead, the death and the pain. My closest friends are with me in this flooded and dirty trench. But now we may all die by running into certain death. Just sprinting towards armed men with guns, ordered to kill you. It's stupid. I hope everyone makes it out alive.
Robert LeBoeuf, July the 1st, 1916. Wounded at Beaumont Hamel,
during the fighting of the first day of the Somme, 8th July 1916, admitted into the Royal Victorian Hospital, Netley. August the 11th, 1916, died of his wound to the right thigh. August the 12th, 1916, buried in Wandsworth Cemetery. Age of death, 25.
As Scott Benedict and James Lossy read aloud the soldiers' fates, the actors portraying them fall one by one.
Silas Edgecombe, July the 1st, 1916. While serving with C Company during the fighting of the first day of the Battle of Somme, Private Edgecombe was wounded at Beaumont Hamel, suffering from those injuries to the left knee inflicted by artillery fire. July the 4th, 1916. Evacuated back to England to receive treatment into the 3rd London General Hospital, Wandsworth. 11th July 1916. Private Edgecombe died of wounds at Wandsworth Hospital. 14th of July 1916. Private Edgecombe was buried in Wandsworth Cemetery at 2:30 in the afternoon with full military honours. A firing party and a bugler were in attendance, as was the Newfoundland Prime Minister, Michael Morris. A Newfoundland flag was draped over his coffin. Age of death, 21.
And it's over the mountains and over the sea. Come brave Newfoundlanders and join the blue tees. We'll fight the honey Flanders and at Gallipoli. Enlist you Newfoundlanders and come forward.
Of the 780 men who went over the top on the 1st of July, only 68 were available for roll call the next day. For all intents and purposes, the Newfoundland Regiment had been wiped out.
After their performance, the visitors from Beatrix Potter follow Burntwood's head teacher outside to that school's flagpole, where another set of poppies, each one again bearing the name of one of the Newfoundlanders, is planted in the lawn around the pole, as Burntwood student Rebecca Howe prepares to play the last post.
I thought it was really moving, but sweet at the same time. I thought they did a really good mix of putting a nice touch to it as well as the serious side to it, and I thought they presented it really well by giving names of individual people and that, so yeah.
How old are you now?
I'm 16.
You are only 2 or 3 years younger than some of these soldiers who died.
Yeah.
What thoughts go through your head when you think of your age and the people you know, an older brother, an older sister?
Well, I have an older sister and she's going to be 18 next year, and thinking of her going to war is ridiculous because she's just learning to drive, so it's like, it's crazy, but that's what makes it so commemorable, to say, you know, you were so brave to think that you could go out and fight for your country, and some of them did and some of them came home, a lot of them didn't, but the fact that at 18 years old they were considering going to fight for their country is something to be proud of, because what they did was really, really brave and really important to our history.
At first, I thought it was quite nervous since there were 1,500 people, but then I actually quite enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else did.
I think we did really well. I think we tried our best and put loads of effort into it, and no one messed up, which is a good thing, and it turned out really well. And hopefully it will make people back in Newfoundland happy and proud.
Back at Beatrix Potter, head teacher Steph Neal reflects on the day. He says the connection that's been made between his students and the Newfoundlanders across the road is as much about the future as it is about the past.
We had a child who said, well, why do we have wars? I think, if somebody could really answer that, it might actually stop wars. And I think it's understanding that wars are fought, and as a result, people get killed. And you hope that, these children one day might become leaders. They might become people who can influence decision making. And maybe it makes them think about what you can do, maybe not to have a war. That sounds very highfalutin, but they need to understand, our soldiers have been in Afghanistan, they've been in Iraq, and we know they've been wounded, many have been killed, and those children need to know that war has consequences. I think it's vital.
In the end, it doesn't really do that much, apart from killing loads of people, which isn't that good, which isn't good at all. So I think if countries disagree about something, their leaders should just not start a war, they should just talk about it.
Just because two people who are important have an argument or a fight, or if someone threatens someone, say a normal person threatening someone else, if it was a bad threat, they had a knife or something, they'd go to jail. But here, if that happens, a war starts.
Millions of people die in wars. It's pointless. 2 words. Stop fighting.
The next day, I returned to the Newfoundland plot, alone this time, to photograph the headstones. A cemetery maintenance van pulls up while I'm there. The young driver says hello and asks if I'm from Newfoundland. Says he's here to tidy things up a bit. I suggest that the graves look pretty well looked after already. Without hesitation, he replies, "It's the least we can do for these lot."
Everyone should be so proud of them because they went out there and they fought and they lost their lives fighting for Britain and Serbia and the other countries.
They helped us, and I think that's why we can't forget them, because they didn't just fight for their country, they fought for others too.
I take a few more pictures and then I turn to go. Suddenly, I'm aware of the sound of laughter. Children's laughter, drifting across Magdalen Road. The students at Beatrix Potter are playing out in the yard. Life goes on. The poppies the year twos planted the other day are starting to blow away in the November wind. But there will be new poppies next year, and the year after that.
They had special sort of bandages, they look like, which they wrap round the bottom of their trousers to keep the mud from going in their boots. And the only colour they could find was blue. And so they got called the Blue Puttees.
A new class will come and say these Newfoundlanders' names out loud.
Herbert Miles.
Tiny fingers will once again trace the letters carved into these stones, and they will be remembered.
It's important to know their name so we can respect them fully and remember that they had their own life, not just fighting in the war. I think it's upsetting and unfair that they died so young.
And it makes us sad because those men, they went into the war thinking it would be easy, and you come out and most of them are dead. So it makes you feel like we're lucky that that didn't happen to us.
I just want to say thank you so much for helping us in the war. I just want to say their graves are being looked after very well as well, if you're wondering.
For On the Go, I'm Ted Blades at Wandsworth Cemetery in London.